Hey everyone, it's Tom Tucker from the Academy for Professional Painting Contractors, back for another episode of From Ladder to Legacy. As a reminder, you can catch up on all the From Ladder to Legacy episodes on your favorite podcast channel or on YouTube. And as a reminder, if you want to get a 100% free business diagnostic to help you in your painting business, go to paintersacademy.com/free biz call and fill out the form. Well, folks, we have a great show for you today. The Academy COO, Tara Riley, is sitting down with Walt Dykes, the owner of D&D Decorating located in Brunswick, Georgia, and they're going to discuss the business Walt has built and the next chapter on his journey. So let's get this going and bring everyone in. Good morning, Tara.
Hey, good morning, Tom. Thanks.
Walt, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us today on From Ladder to Legacy.
Certainly. Thanks for having me.
Well, this is great. Walt, obviously we have an opportunity to talk quite often, but, I think one thing that strikes me is that, coming into next year, 2026, you're going to be celebrating your 40th year in business. Is that accurate?
Correct. Yeah.
Well, let's go back to the beginning. Walt, how did you get into the painting business?
Well, I had intended on going to college and got kicked out of high school because I was an entrepreneur in high school and they didn't approve of what I was selling. And so I got kicked out of high school and kicked out of college, and then I became an iron worker. And I did that for travel the country doing that for about 7 years. And then I got married, and we had not discussed that, what we were going to do and all that, so she lived in a same small town that I'm from, and so we got married and had a child, and then all of a sudden I got laid off as an iron worker. And so I made a phone call, and this was on a Thursday afternoon, and I came home and told her, you need to start packing. We need to be in Michigan on Monday morning for me to start my next job up in Michigan, and good pay, all that stuff. So anyway, she says, it's cold in Michigan, and I'm not going, and Dylan's not going, my son that was 2 weeks old. And I said, oh, hell. So what are we going to do? And she said, well, you can go. And I said, well, I'm not going if you're not going. So I decided to start my own business. I'd always been a bit of a workaholic. So even when I was iron working, I was doing side jobs. If they didn't work more than 10 hours a day, I'd do side jobs to take up some time, and did carpentry and that sort of thing. So I was going to be a carpenter. And I decided to run ads in the newspaper and do that. And I did that for about 3 months. Went through a pile of money, couldn't hardly find any jobs. And then one day I was riding by the local electric company, and the electric company that supplies electricity for the area. And they had a trailer out there, and I saw a big building going up, and an addition to the business. And so I stopped in there and I talked to the guy that was running the show. He was superintendent on the job, and I asked him if he had all of his subs lined up, because I hadn't been able to find any work. And he said, everything but painters. And I said, well, you're in luck. That's what I am. And he says, okay, can you give me a price on this job? And I said, sure. And he gave me a set of plans, and I threw them on my shoulder, and I went home. I did all the takeoffs, square footages, counted how many doors, how many rolls of wallpaper. I measured all that up. I'm 25 years old. And so whenever I got done doing that, I didn't know how to put a number to it, but my brother had been painting for a while. So I got him over there. We put the numbers to it, come up to $42,000. I took it, we wrote it up, and I took it back up there to the guy, and he said, man, you're right in budget. And I said, well, that's great. And he said, how many painters do you need? And I said, well, how many do you think I need? And he said, I think about 5. And I said, okay, I got 5. And he says, well, and I didn't have any. And he said, well, when can you start? And I said, when do you want to start? And this, I think, was on a Wednesday or something. He said, we need to start Monday. I said, okay, we'll be here. So I had a pickup truck and a bucket of tools, and I went to Sherwin-Williams and sat outside. And when a painter came out, I would try to hire him. And I ended up hiring 3 painters. And then I called my brother, Roger, and I said, you got to quit your job. He said, what? And I said, I got that job, and I can't do it. And he says, okay. So he quit his job, and it was me and Roger and the three painters, and we knocked it out. And about a week before we knocked it out, we decided to drive over to the islands and hand out business cards, and we did that for about 2 days, and we've been busy for 39 years painting. So that's got us into the painting business.
Yeah. There's a description out there that says an entrepreneur jumps off the cliff and builds the plane on the way down. I think you've got that nailed, Walt. I think you got that nailed. I was going to ask you to talk about your first big job, but obviously, clearly, your first job was huge. I mean, I don't know what that would be in today's dollars, maybe $150,000, $200,000 job now.
At least, or better, yeah.
Yeah. So let's just jump right in. So, how did that project turn out? Did you make money on it?
Yeah, we made good money on it. We were able to buy some equipment and that sort of stuff. Wasn't quite ready for a van and all yet, but we were able to buy some equipment. But it wasn't but a couple months later we got vans and started doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, worked great.
So what was your day-to-day like in the early years? Were you on the ladder somewhat and out selling? What all did you do?
Certainly on that first job, we worked about 60 hours a week, and we did it all. I was on the ladders the whole time and doing that. And then, like I said, the last couple of weeks we got out and about and trying to drum up business, but it just started out right on the ladders working.
Yeah. You referred to like talking about being an iron worker, and if it wasn't at least or more than a 10-hour day, then you were still side hustling. What shaped you obviously have a clear, strong work ethic. What in your background shaped that work ethic?
Well, I don't think that I can outpour mouth Brandon, but I'll give it my best shot. We came up. I had 4 older brothers. There's 5 of us, and mom and dad. And we lived in a house that didn't have anything on the walls. It was just stud walls, and it was out behind the grits mill, and we didn't have many means of doing things, and so we had running water in the house, but no bathtub. We had a number 3 wash tub. We sat in the middle of the floor, and all 7 of us took a bath every night. Mama had warmed the water on the wood burning stove and do that, and so yeah, and I always took a bath last, and I always thought it was because of hierarchy. I was the youngest, so that wasn't what I just got that brought to my attention by one of my brothers a couple of weeks ago. No, the reason you went last is because you might crap in the tub. Then it'd be like by the time I'd get in there, there'd be about an inch of sand in the bottom because we all worked all our life. I started working whenever I was 5 and getting paid. And I would work in the tobacco patch and that, and then about 6, I was a tractor driver and that. So I worked on a farm. It wasn't our farm, but so I got paid, and we all got paid to contribute to the living and to be able to buy school clothes and all that sort of thing all our life. So we started out early, learning that if we were going to survive, we had to work.
I think there's a huge value in that. And, so let's go back to the business. So you guys have been up painting. Was there a point after you started the painting business that you really had sort of a turning point or a wake up call that, hey, this can really scale, or did it just sort of scale naturally for you? What were some of the steps that happened to grow your business?
Everything just kind of happened naturally. And it's, I don't know. We started out, very, very small with just 5 of us, I think, painting. And then by the end of the first year, we were at like 33. And then we decided that paint was expensive. And so we bought a paint store. Me and my brother, we bought a paint store. It was a Duron store. And we stayed in that business for about 4 years, and we found out painters don't pay their bills, and so we put out a bunch of credit, and so we decided to shut that down because it was not profitable for us. Meanwhile, I ran the contracting business, Roger ran the paint store, and when we were done with all that, we had been partners, and we decided we'd rather be brothers than be partners, and we had never been never an argument or anything. We just had a different mentality of how to run the business. Roger wanted to stay down to 3 or 5 people, and I wanted to grow the business. And that's what we couldn't agree on that. And so he went on and started his own wallpaper business and did that for about 10 years. But I continued to grow the business, and that every every night I'd get phone calls. They didn't have cell phones back then, so I'd get calls at night from customers, and I'd estimate all day, and I'd go get and work on the crew and all that sort of stuff. And then at night I would figure plans, at home, and send out estimates and do all that sort of stuff. Do all the admin myself. That was back whenever we didn't have computers. We did it with a magazine, taking out people's taxes and all that. I did all that stuff. But yeah, that's the way it started working. And we did excellent work, as best as could be done.
Yeah.
And I think that in a small island town, that is huge. And you can't help but grow if you do that.
Well, and then, so kind of moving into the scale, you over the years have, that drive to scale has stuck with you, and you've done some really interesting things, including adding some other lines of business. So, I know you mentioned, you talked about doing liquid siding and some other like some walk-in bathtub. Talk a little bit about that era of your business, and you grew to be a fairly large business covering many states. So, just give a little synopsis of what the mindset was that got you there, and kind of what the scale and what you learned from growing those sides of the business.
Well, one thing is I get bored very easily, and I'd gotten bored with working. I think in 2000, in 99, we probably had 45, 50 painters, and things were going well. And I was running it all basically by myself. And my wife came, she had a corporate background, and she came into the office and totally changed the way the admin part of it worked, so that we could figure out, okay, are we making money or are we not? And so we started doing very, very well. And then I read an article that my uncle sent me, a piece of clipping from a newspaper where he's up in North Carolina, and he read an article about liquid siding, and he sent me that clipping of that paper, and I read it, and I said, well, that's interesting. So I started researching it to find out what that was, because I was always looking for a better product. We're on the ocean, so the elements are horrible. So always wanted something that's going to stand up over time, not just look good when we get done, but stand up over time. And so I found that product, and I started, I said, well, I want to start that business. I contacted the guy that ran it, was in Knoxville, Tennessee. I went up there and visited with him, and I bought 3 dealerships that covered North Florida, South Georgia, and Western Central Georgia area, and then later South Carolina, and really all of Florida, all the way to Miami. I bought all the rest of Florida. So I bought those territories to do that, and it was a different type of business than painting, although it was a coating business. The marketing and sales aspect was huge, because it wasn't where you could get word of mouth advertisement in 3 states. I had to do serious marketing and one call closes and all that sort of thing. So that's where I really learned how to do that part of the business.
You ran some street teams at that point. You did a lot of canvassing for that business. I think you mentioned also running a telemarketing, like having a telesales offices. So talk a little bit about that, because I think the scale of that to me is just fascinating.
Yeah, I started telemarketing early on. When I did that, I said, okay, we got to get business in here. The first few weeks, nothing,
Yeah.
And so I started telemarketing, and that was successful. I had, I think, 30 telemarketers, and then some other people in that department, a manager and that, and all, about 35 in all in that department. And then I decided, well, down in South Florida, I would canvas would be an easier way to work down there. So I hired canvassers. They worked like 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, and I had uh, I think 50 canvassers in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, and then I started open office. I had an office down there, so I opened office in Jacksonville, and had a dozen canvassers there, and then I had a dozen here in Brunswick that did Brunswick and in South Carolina, and so yeah, had a lot of canvassers, a lot of phone people, marketing people.
Yeah, amazing. It's just the scale. Again, it's like anything else. It's just wash, rinse, repeat, right? It's just if one can do it, then 50 can do it, right?
Yeah, just train. Put everything on videos and show them how this is a video. This is how you do it, and then
Yeah.
a little role playing with them and turn them loose.
All right. So and then at some point you added walk-in bathtubs. Is that right?
I did. I did that when the recession hit, and I was working 120 painters in Brunswick alone.
Yeah.
And 2000 from about 2001 to 2009, and then the recession hit us. And for us, it was a depression. It was more than a recession. I mean, it just dried up, and we went down to like 12 painters and a couple of admin people, and so at that point, I said, I can't survive. What happened really during the beginning of that, whenever it started falling apart, was there were some very large companies that we did business with, super large jobs. I say super large, $750 million jobs, and then I did some government projects at the same time that was $300,000 or $400,000 a piece. And what happened was these contractors I was working for bellied up, and they left me holding the bag, and I lost a lot of property, and a lot of cash, and I kept everybody going as long as I could, and then it just kind of fell apart, and I said, well, I got to do something else, and I had a friend that was in the liquid siding business, and he's one of those that really just screwed up the installation of it. And he'd end up moving back to Canada, and he was dead broke and devastated. And I gave him the money to get back to Canada, and he got up there and he took a month off, and then he started a walk-in bathtub business up in Canada. And he calls me during this recession or depression that we were having. He said, "Man, you need to come up here." I said, "Man, I don't have the money to fly." And he said, "I'll send you a ticket." So I flew up there and I spent a week with Bob, and Bob showed me the ropes on the walk-in bathtub business. And I came back home and I got started up, and I opened up office here in Brunswick, and we did North Florida and South Georgia and South Carolina, and then I bought a dealership in Dallas, and we covered all of Texas, and I bought a dealership in Indianapolis, and we did all of Indiana and the edges of all the surrounding states, not the whole states, but the edges of it. So yeah, the tub business, we were doing about 9 states, and we sold a lot of walk-in bathtubs and installed them, and did that for just a few years and burned out on that. But I kept the painting business going this whole time. And once I burned out on that, then I came back and started blowing that up again.
Yeah. So, so it's quite a story and quite a journey. So now we're in the 2020s here, and I think I probably met you, gosh, we figure about 8 or 9 years ago at Brendan Summit, I think, in the first place, and crossed paths with you a few times at PCA. I'm sorry, I'm going to say PDCA. That's the old school version.
It was to start with. Yeah.
It was to start with. That's right. So, and we talked on and off a bit. About a year ago at Summit, you said, "Hey, we're going to talk a little bit about legacy here." You said, "Hey, I think I know what my next cycle is," and you mentioned that you were ready to maybe get your sons more. They're involved, but that they might be ready to start taking over the business from you. And so, tell me a little bit about that. What led up to I actually think at some point you and I may have talked about selling the business. I think you might have thought about that. But tell me a little bit about the legacy. What's happened now in this last phase of your life? Where are you headed, and what's that journey been like?
Well, a couple of years ago, my youngest son, I owned another painting business about 60 miles from here, and it was a small business. And I started that business up in case one of the boys might be interested in running a business. And so I started up and I ran it for about 6 years, and I had built it up a little bit, and not too terribly much. But my youngest son said he kept after me about wanting me to retire, wanting to take over my business. And well, I was young. That wasn't going to happen. And so finally I said, I got to get him out of my hair. And so I put him over there in Waycross in that small painting business over there. And I said, if you run this one, we'll talk about running D&D later. And that was really a training exercise. And he jumped in there, and he's been there for 2 years, and he has built the business, and he has bought his own building, paid cash out of pocket, and remodeled it out of pocket, and did all that at nights and weekends himself, most of it. And he
Yeah.
really stepped up to the plate and done a great job. At the time, whenever I met with you at Summit, I was still thinking about selling D&D, but then Dylan and Devin came to their mother and conspired against me. I had a fire in mind and everything. And so they wanted to take the business, and I said, okay, if that's what you guys want to do, that's fine with me. And so Devin has gotten some skill sets. The youngest one, he's 35, and he's gotten some skill sets by running that other business. And then Dylan is my field operations manager here, and he has really stepped it up in the last 6 months. And all that is stuff that I learned at Summit and learned from you and coaching on how to tell them what to look for and what to do. And so they're getting ready. I'm teaching them everything I can about things that are in my head that's not on paper.
Yeah.
That they need to know. What numbers to look at, what to do when this number hits this, all those sorts of things. So I'll spend the next couple of years getting them tuned up and in shape and ready. And then I'll monitor from the house for a year. And then it'll be theirs.
Yeah. I think you mentioned it was, really wanting to tighten up systems. A lot of it, you've clearly been incredibly successful over your career, and and you follow the mold of a lot of really good entrepreneurs I've known and worked with over the years. Your gut, a lot of times everyone said, well, you can't go by your gut. You got to look at the numbers. Well, what good entrepreneurs, their gut is right. And you do look at numbers, but there's one thing to know, like, hey, I'm looking at these numbers, but there's also a way to systematize that, say, so that we make sure we're looking at the right numbers and teach other people how to do that. So one of the things I appreciated about you is like, hey, I want to tighten up the systems in my business. I want to make sure that I'm turning this over in as good a shape as I can to them, but also educating, making sure, I think one of the challenges I see with like generational transfers is you have a lot of knowledge in your head and you make decisions because you have that experience. But sometimes the younger generation doesn't have all the experience. And so they don't know why you're making the decision you make, and you're like, well, we went through the Depression, and then we went through COVID, and we've been through, well, you probably went through 2 or 3 recessions and a depression. You've changed. And, as much as, I think your instinct to give Devin say, go run this business. And, there's nothing, more experiential than just trial by fire. Right. And, and he's proven himself. He's growing that business. And, I will tell you, I enjoy our meetings. One of the things we've put in place is structure and how to get them involved in the decision making. And I think it's kind of fun watching them learn and kind of grow into, the whole decision making process. And so I appreciate you taking me on that journey, because it's for me, it's fun. I mean, it's fun to watch. And, I know, business is stressful. I mean, we know that, but it is kind of a fun and a journey to see younger people stepping up into it. And I will say this, I think they are chips off the old block, Walt. They both seem to have a pretty strong work ethic, and they clearly learned something or got good genes or something from you. So I think they're going to be pretty successful. But so what do what do you think? What's been the biggest aha for you? I mean, even after 40 years in business, was there anything that stood out to you in terms of this transition that maybe that you've learned that you hadn't thought of before?
Well, it's not that I haven't thought of things before, I just didn't do them. And I think that it is, and I've tried to do things and was unsuccessful at them, like managing the numbers. You've really taught me a lot on that, and it's stuff that I kind of knew. I just didn't know how to put it together where you could watch it really, really close. And so that has been key in training them to. Like you said, I'm seeing light bulb moments in them every time we go over these numbers. And I've wanted those numbers for 40 years, but my accountant don't talk to me like a painter. He talks to me like an accountant. And I don't understand that jive.
Yeah.
Nobody does but an accountant. And so you don't get any clear numbers of what you really need until you talk to somebody like yourself that knows what those numbers represent and which numbers you really need. The crap they give you as an accountant, you don't need hardly any of that.
Right.
I know what's in their checking account. That's about all they can tell me. How much taxes I owe.
Yeah.
But what, knowing how many leads do we get, how many leads do we need, how many, how many dollars of sales do we need to have in the pipeline? There's just a multitude of numbers that are so important. And getting my boys tuned up on how to manage those numbers they've become excited about it. And so have I. So I think looking back, if I would have hired a business coach 20 years ago, my boys wouldn't have to work now.
Well, it's like I said, you've built an amazing thing, and the numbers are just what they are, but it is true. I think, and it's one of the things I think people are challenged with is kind of like numbers seem like, I don't know, sometimes they just seem to be mystical almost to people, or they can't, like you said, sometimes you see them, but you don't see them all together at once where, oh, there's a story there. So what I like is, I nerd out on numbers. So it's like, oh, there's a whole story in these numbers every time you look at them. So but anyway, so if we had to look back, over this whole 40-year journey of yours, what are you most proud of?
Oh gosh, that's a long time. I think what I'm most proud of is bringing my boys up in a way that they know how to make a living, and they know, and they have good work ethic. This morning at 3:40, my alarm thing went off that somebody was in my shop, and that was my son at 3:40 this morning. So he woke up, came on into work because he had some things to do. So yeah, the main the thing is they're going to be able to do things that I was never able to do because they started at a much higher level than I did. I had to learn everything the hard way. I created as I went. And, everything I'd done was out of necessity. I wrote a price book out of necessity. Wrote a employee handbook out of necessity. Everything I've ever done has been out of necessity. And all that stuff I've done, they get to start at a much higher level than I did. And what they're going to do is going to be way beyond anything I could have ever imagined doing. And so starting something that they can finish, I think is my biggest achievement.
Yeah. Well, you've created quite a legacy for that, for sure. Kind of circling back to if you were talking to somebody just starting out, not including your sons, but somebody out there that's really just picking up the brush and starting their own business, what's one piece of advice you'd give them?
Oh Lord, I could give them a lot of advice, but the main piece of advice I think I could give them is actually two. Don't worry about overcharging. I'd rather fail from overcharging than belly up because I couldn't pay my bills. Okay. And then the other thing is seek education early. Don't try to do this alone.
Yeah.
There's help out there, and that wasn't there 40 years ago.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tom, why don't you take us out here?
Wow, I got to tell you, Walt, that's an incredible, incredible story. And the advice you've given, I think it's awesome advice for anyone in the business. You surely don't want to apologize for your price. Hey, you haven't built a business like Tara was saying. You built a legacy. It's so awesome that your sons be out there and they have a chance. It's one thing to work in a career and a job, but it's another thing to run a family business. And you think in the future, this may go generational to your son's children and then on, and that's what you built. And that's something really to be proud of. You think about, you talked a lot about, your journey here with Tara, but I was thinking where you're at in Brunswick. I used to live up the road a bit in South Carolina on a barrier island myself. As you get off I-95 and all those barrier islands, you get billboards and billboards all over the place. If your story was put on one of those billboards, what would it say?
Oh, that's a humbling question. I would say thank you to Brunswick and the Golden Isles and all the barrier islands up and down the coast from Florida to North Carolina. I would just say thank you for spoiling me for 40 years, and please continue to give our next generation of great painters that same love you've given me.
Awesome. That's great. Well, Walt, we appreciate you taking time to be with us today. And I know you're a regular attendee of PCA events and of also the summit. And what would you say to folks out there that have never been to a summit? This is the 10th anniversary this year, coming up in Chattanooga in January.
I'd say go. I went to one like 9 years ago and 10 years ago, something like that. It's been a good while. And then I went to one last year, and the difference that it's been over the last decade of Brandon's putting that on is incredible. There was people there years and years ago that were very, very small that are huge businesses now, bigger than I ever thought about being. And they learned that by Brandon's simple message of this is how you do it. And then being able to talk with like-minded people that's been through the same crap is probably more important than what you get at the summit from the teaching. But you will learn all kinds of things. And then if you get an opportunity, get you a business coach from APPC. The curriculum you get is great, but nothing like the one-on-ones you get with a coach that knows their stuff.
Well, again, thanks again for being with us today, Walt. We appreciate it. Tara, anything else?
No, thanks, Walt. It's a fun journey. I appreciate, and I'm honored that you've let me help you with it. It's been fun for sure. So
we certainly appreciate you.